his requirements. The word is used in the text. Back with me to Colossians chapter 2. This time in verse 11 we read, "In him you were also circumcised with the circumcision made without hands, by putting off the body of the sins of the flesh by the circumcision of Christ, buried with him in baptism, in which you were also raised with him through faith in the working of God who raised him from the dead. And you, being dead in your trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh, he is made alive together with him, having forgiven you all trespasses, having wiped out the handwriting of requirements," please note that word once again, "that was against us, which was contrary to us, and he's taken it out of the way, having nailed it to the cross, having disarmed principalities and powers, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them in it." Your attention, please. One, first sentence, his resources are, and you learned, accessible, available, and able. Now you know why. Two, his requirements are. And they're threefold in the text. Circumcision 1, baptism 2, forgiveness 3. Let's go back to circumcision. What is this circumcision thing? Now, he doesn't say this is circumcision with hands. This is spiritual circumcision. Now, all of you know what physical circumcision is. It is a very awkward topic to have in a mixed sex crowd because, for some strange reason, we'll tend to be a little juvenile on that subject, start to snicker, start to smile. Oh, is he going to talk about that? Yeah, I will. For an important reason. Think about it. As much as it might make you feel awkward, I think it was intended to. As much as it might make you blush, I think it's part of its purpose, you see? Because when it comes to the foreskin, on that private part of the body, to be involved in this act, circumcision, three things. One, it was very serious. Very, very serious. Two, it was very, very spiritual. And three, it was very, very sacrificial. Go back to it being very serious. Imagine the first time they knew this was the sign of the covenant. Wouldn't you think? Moses would say, "How about a handshake, God? How about anything other than circumcision?" Why? Because that's on a very, very special private part. I mean, that's something that, isn't it personal? Isn't this personal? Now, how do we take something so personal and make it so public? Listen again. Why is it we're taking something so personal and making it so public? There's a tendency in some circles of life to assume that our relationship with God is simply a private matter. How many times have you heard people say, well, spiritual things are private matters? Yes, they're private because they're personal, but the personal side of that private matter is supposed to be public, sufficient for your identity in the relationship itself. It was private, but it was public, and it was serious. So serious, I'm sure there wasn't a single Jewish male that didn't first think through whether or not he wanted to be a part of this covenant. Why? Because it's serious. It's serious. In fact, it's so serious. Recently, in a conversation with a medical doctor over this act later in life, he said, and I quote, "It hurts. It hurts. And the healing process is long. The older you are, the longer it takes. It is a big deal." Now keep in mind, when this first idea of circumcision was presented, these guys were not all infants. No, the older men had to go through this very serious act. Serious act. But was it simply physical? No. And again, my second point under the subtopic circumcision, it was spiritual. It was spiritual. It wasn't cut off the foreskin of that private part, and you know what? From that day forward, you're going to honor and obey God. No, this is just a symbol. It's a symbol. And you know it's serious. This symbol is not going to suddenly make you holy. But let me say, this symbol, because it's spiritual, you will never forget it. Why? Isn't that a private part that's used on a regular basis? Yes. And every time, a few times a day, you would be very reminded of the fact that you are different from everyone else. Please, don't just keep this illustration from a physical standpoint in your mind or in your understanding. If you will continue to connect those dots, you will say yes. And a covenantal relationship with God is serious. A covenantal relationship with God is spiritual. So many of you have determined to do a serious thing by allowing Christ to circumcise your heart, and that serious thing you did, you're reminded of daily. Sacrificial? Yeah, there's a cost involved. This would mark you for life. This isn't something where you get circumcised and then decide a few weeks later, you know what? I think I'll change my mind. I think I'd like to, hey, is that extra flesh around? That extra flesh at this point in time is an embarrassment. Do you understand? Now, move with me for a moment. It's Romans chapter 2, keeping your place in Colossians 2. I think I've said enough, but the way the writer of Romans writes it, it's Romans 2 and 28. For he is not a Jew who is one outwardly, nor is circumcision that which is outward in the flesh, but he is a Jew who is one inwardly. And circumcision is that of the heart, in the spirit, not in the letter, whose praise is not from men, but from God. Now is it a matter of the flesh? No, he says, take the principle, take the practice, but apply it spiritually speaking to your own life. Go back with me to Colossians chapter 2. This time, reread verse 11. In him you were also circumcised with the circumcision made without hands, by putting off the body of sins of the flesh by the circumcision of Christ. Here's what happened. You came forward Wednesday night, weekend study. You said, Jesus, I'm ready. And what did he do? With the sword of the Spirit, he came into your heart and he cut right at the root of your rebellion. It wasn't a specific sin. Here he says, it's the body of sin. It's the whole deal. It's the you saying, God, I'm ready. Do spiritual surgery on me and go ahead and cut off all of my unnecessary flesh. Cut out and cut off all of my unnecessary flesh. What is the fleshly thing in your life right now that is completely unnecessary, but it's that part of your flesh that still, has a desire, has an appetite? He says, when it comes to requirements, listen, guys, it's not even physical circumcision. He says, you want to be right with God. If you want to access those resources, if you want to, when Christ says, come to me, go to him, walk boldly in the throne room of grace, find mercy for your time of need. He says, all you have to do, really, the requirements, allow Christ in your heart with the surgical tool of his Spirit and allow him to begin to cut out all the unnecessary flesh.